is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Tuesday in June. Jonas, we got a lot to talk about here on today's episode. We're going to give our mini camp overreactions. We're also going to discuss the fact that the Ravens are going to be featured on Hard Knocks. How true to themselves will they be? We'll talk about it. But Jonas, first, we got breaking news. We got brand new helmets. Purple Rising Ravens alternate helmets. I'm flashing the picture up on the screen. If you're not watching, it should be on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We are live every week. You could be listening to us after the fact on any of your favorite podcast platforms. By the way, give us a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, write us a good review. I'll read it out here on the show. Jonas, we just hopped on. This news just broke 30 minutes ago, so I haven't even heard what you think about these. You wrote about it on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. What do you think about these Purple Rising helmets?
Paul, no mention of my purple in honor of the Purple Rising helmet.
Was that purposeful,
colorblind, dude? Yeah,
Purples.
I was going through my closet looking for something snazzy or respectable to wear. It's like, hey, I got some purple.
Yeah,
I think it's fine. I think the color rush jerseys with the all purple jersey, pants, and the black helmet is probably one of my least favorite combos. This, I think, completes it a little bit better, but I'm still not just a fan in general of the all purple look. I do like the gold striping on the helmet. I think that classes it up a little bit. But for me, like the logo itself, I think you either have to go like full kind of silly throwback or something a little bit more avant-garde. And I think that's the second time I've used that in as many episodes.
Yeah, that's your word of the day for the last two episodes is avant-garde.
So for me, it's like a, I don't know, 6 or 7 out of 10, like a solid day's work, but I'm not slapping it on any merchandise I'm looking to move. I mean, obviously people are gonna freak the F out because it is finally a long-awaited alternate something, and I totally get that. I support their enthusiasm, but speaking as objectively as I can, it's better than a lot of the new efforts from teams around the league, trying to move some merchandise, trying to come out with something new colorway, new logo, whatever. But for me, it doesn't really get my goat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm curious as to the decision to use that logo with the Raven straight on, not the profile view, which I'm sure you know this, Jonas, but I'm not sure everybody does. The Ravens logo is one of the few logos in professional sports where the letter is faced the right way, even though the profile switches angles. So obviously the Ravens bird is always facing forward on the helmet, but the B always fits perfectly and is facing the correct way on the logo. I think the Chiefs are the only other one maybe in the NFL, which I think is unique and cool. And I think that's why it works on the Ravens helmet, which is why I'm not crazy about the idea of using the straight on view of the Raven on the side of the helmet. That's the straight on view, I think, would be better as they've used it on the sleeve, because you would think it's the bird looking at you in this instance. I would have to talk to Rise and Conquer, the two birds that are the actual Ravens mascots that are currently residing at the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore, to get their opinion on whether this is a realistic depiction of a raven. It leaves a little bit to be desired there. I don't know how many ravens actually have red eyes. Do you know, Jonas? I'll talk to some
I guess only the ones that have really been indulging on a certain day in April. But we could talk about that at a later point. We did just get sent some publicity art from the Ravens, and there is a shot from Mark Andrews that looks really good. I don't know why so many of the promotional art is like of the kind of fuzzy out of focus thing. I just like, give me the goods to focus on. I like the Mark Andrews shot. I don't know if the helmet is going to be a matte finish. I'm not sure if that would help.
Yeah, that's what it looked like on the 360 degree, which is like the Vikings helmet, I should say, which is that purple matte finish, was right. What made me think of it.
I mean, so much of this is just you're prisoners of comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. But in our Slack, we saw it was compared to the Vikings, which obviously is the iconic all purple look. Saw some comps to East Carolina and what Keaton Mitchell was rocking. I don't know if they ever had an all purple getup quite like this. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, if the Ravens go out and whoop it up 37-0 on the Browns in this jersey, then this is going to be automatically the favorite of about half the fan base. But if they go out and lose and Lamar Jackson gets hurt, then it's burn this jersey, or burn this helmet and never wear it again.
Yeah, I mean it could end up being like the Orioles City Connect, which has been incredibly unsuccessful. And the
Until
Orioles fans
recently,
are
right?
well, they lost on Friday, which was the last time that they wore it. So I mean, they've had some success in it. But for a team that has been one of the more winning teams in all of baseball the last couple of years, they can't seem to have success on those Friday home games. And whether you want to blame those kind of devoid of creative jerseys or not, I mean, these are fine. I think they're just fine. That's my final take on these. I think I agree. I think they kind of spice up the color rush, which is in itself a kind of bland concept. But
Yeah.
all right. Well, I'm sure people will have their hot takes and let us know what you think of the Ravens' new Purple Rising helmet. All right, Jonah, should we get to our mini camp reactions? Because you've come up with a fun little exercise for us.
Yeah. Rather than just regurgitate everything that I saw and heard and read about at camp, I just thought I would give you some uh, hypotheticals that could be outrageous, that could be practical based on everything that has happened during the offseason, offense and defense, basically gauging both of our respective opinions on how stuff will shake out during the regular season, which is slowly but surely coming up on the calendar. So I guess just to kind of start things off, I think for me, the dominant storyline of camp will be the offensive line. And my question to you, Paul, what are the chances that the offensive line is settled by the second week of training camp? For me, this is like 5%. Harbaugh was asked if he would be comfortable riding out this offensive line competition basically all through camp, or how long he would be comfortable riding it out. He said it would be nice if we could kind of know by the first into the second week of training camp. But that seems extremely unlikely because you can't really do anything during the first 5 days of training camp. You know, it's on-field acclimation work. There's no live contact allowed. And then after that, at no point in training camp are you even allowed more than 3 padded practices in a row. So the fact that John Harbaugh is shooting to basically have all this wrapped up with like 1 week of padded practices under his belt, to me seems just highly unlikely.
Yeah, it seems a little pie in the sky. It seems a little optimistic. I would probably give this a higher percent chance, maybe a 25% chance that they're able to figure it out. But they have 3 spots open. I don't think that can be expressed enough just how rare that is in the NFL. I don't know if there are any other teams that have 3 spots in their offensive line up for grabs. And it is really anybody's guess as to who wins that right tackle competition between Daniel Falele, Roger Rosengarten. The guard spot's still up for grabs. So I don't think this is something they're going to be able to figure out early. I know they've gone into the season at times with somebody in place at a certain spot, and then ultimately throughout the course of the season, they replace somebody. I think that might be a possibility, maybe at the right tackle spot if they go with Falele to start the year and then have the plan to replace him with Roger Rosengarten as the season goes along. But I think that this is really anybody's guess as to who wins those guard spots. I mean, Andrew Voorhees, Josh Jones, Ben Cleveland, Saleh, all up for those spots. There's just too many dominoes for this to be figured out all that early in camp.
How are we feeling about me bringing back a joke that you did not laugh at about a couple of months ago and calling this a 3 body problem? Shout out
Not
Netflix.
great. I mean, I still haven't seen that show, so it does not resonate with me whatsoever.
Okay, well, you're not my core constituency here. It's the nerds listening on the podcast. The first preseason game, for anyone wondering, is August 9th. That would be about like 2.5 weeks into training camp. So maybe we have 4 or 5 starters resolved by then, but we shall see. Prompt number 2.
Sure.
What are the chances that Ronnie Stanley, former All-Pro, Mr. I just got my contract reduced by 1 year because things have not been going great for me, is well and truly back to All-Pro Ronnie?
I'd say 30 to 35% chance. I'm still holding out hope for Ronnie Stanley because we've seen elite play from him in the past, and last year might have been closer to a fluke. He is motivated this season because of that restructured deal that is essentially a 1-year deal. But I think the bigger question here is what happens if he is back? What happens if he has a truly bounce back season? Because he's going to be a free agent after the year. He's going to be heading into his age 31 season in 2025. Do the Ravens look to re-sign him? Because that's another hole along that offensive line, which let's hope everything shakes out at the 2 guard spots. Let's hope maybe Roger Rosengarten or Daniel Falele, probably Rosengarten, gets entrenched at the right tackle spot. Do you really want to go out next offseason and have to draft another left tackle and hope that he works out? That's a hard spot to draft for late in the first round, which is where the Ravens hope to be drafting. What happens? Do you try to just re-sign him? Do you trust the 1 year of him having a bounce back year in 2024? Because if he has a very good year this year, teams have shown that they will pay a lot for left tackles. Even though he will be 31, are you going to pony up the dough to try to keep him?
I don't think teams would pay a lot for him, even if he does have a really, really good 2024, just
Teams
because
get
of that
desperate.
injury history.
Teams
Yeah, I know,
get
but
very
they're not
desperate, though.
they're not gonna offer him a long-term deal.
Do you
He
think
is
he
on the wrong side of 30. He has not played, well for a sustained stretch, even if he does in 2024. For me, like, the chances that he's back, just to answer the question itself, is like 10 to 15%. I just think that
wow.
with as many bumps in the road that he's had, at a certain point, the suspension in your car kind of gets effed up. You know what I mean? And unless you go in and get a new model,
If you
it's
have
it's really
rodents
tough
chewing
to
through
have that thing.
the underside of your car like
No,
you have, Jonas.
no, but I do have another car problem that has required my car to be in the shop for about 2 weeks now. So let's not talk about it. It's a little bit sensitive, but I just think that he, he said last year that he hadn't felt this good since the 2020 season, and that's
Mhm.
also what he said this year. So you can feel great, but all it takes is one bad movement, and that ankle injury starts to feel as worse as it does ever. You know what I mean? It's just really tough to see a guy who has, at this point, what would probably be considered a chronic injury getting back to his pre-injury form.
Yeah, this is the silly season. This is like the first week of pitchers and catchers in spring training to bring things back to baseball. This is where everybody is reporting in the best shape of their life. And I'm sure in a month's time when they report to training camp, we'll hear the same thing. And the bullets start flying at the start of preseason and then week 1, and then things change. But I think there is somewhat of a decent chance that he still returns to maybe not his, Pro Bowl form, but if he returns to close to that, I just do wonder if the Ravens will be able or willing, whether teams offer him a long-term deal in free agency or not, whether the Ravens can match or exceed what other teams are offering him, and whether they want to do that in a year's time. We shall see.
Yeah, I do think this Todd Monken offense will probably be flattering to his skill set, because if we see more quick game, if we see more screens, if we see more outside zone stuff, that is the kind of play calling that favors someone who is lighter on his feet, is not trying to just maul people over, like, I don't know, a Daniel Falele. So we shall see. It could be that this is a bit of a renaissance season for Ronnie, and a lot of that might be because of the Ravens doing stuff that is more in keeping with his skill set. Speaking of that tackle spot, what are the chances that someone besides Daniel Falele or rookie second round pick Roger Rosengarten starts at right tackle in week 1? Bring this up because Falele has been working out somewhat at right guard. Joe D said that he is somewhat under consideration there. It sounds like we don't think that he's an ideal match for Todd Monken because of his lack of mobility. Roger Rosengarten, I think, had some tough reps in minicamp where even someone as kind of under the radar as Malik Cam was giving him some trouble. We all remember just how much of a slog that Michigan game was for him in the national championship game. So Ravens don't have great options beyond them. We know Patrick McCarry can be kind of that stopgap measure, but the Ravens seem to like having him more as a swing guy who can come in and just put out any kind of fire. We know Josh Jones has some experience at right tackle, although he is also not exactly the prototype that you want to insert there. So, what are the odds that someone besides the big two is starting there at right tackle in week 1?
I don't think it's very high. I think it's like 10 to 15% chance because I think offensive line coach Joe D'Alessandris, when he was meeting with the media, came very close to saying Patrick McCary is a great backup. He stopped himself as he was about to say it. What he likes and what the Ravens like about Patrick McCary is that he can be used all along that offensive line, and they want to keep him in that role where he can swing between tackle spots. You can use him as at a guard spot if you absolutely need to. I don't think McCary's going to be in legitimate consideration for a starting spot here. I think they're going into camp with the hope that Roger Rosengarten will take this spot from Daniel Faalele, because Joe D was also not all that high about Daniel Faalele. He's still kind of referring to him as a work in progress. That's not
Yep.
exactly what you want to hear heading into what should be a breakout season for him, and it doesn't seem like he's on track to have that spot. I think they want Roger Rosengarten to take the spot from him, and I think it's going to end up being one of those two guys. It'll be Faalele, I think, if Rosengarten is not deemed ready.
And I wonder how much of the consideration will be given to kind of the matchups that might await in week one. You know, obviously Chris Jones is a beast of a player who lines up inside, but I think what makes him so incredible as a player is that you can line him up, you know, as a 5 tech, as a 7 tech, and take on tackles and just kind of uproot them. And you know, do you feel more comfortable with a Faalele there as opposed to Rosengarten because of just the struggles that we kind of saw from Rosengarten against strength, against some of the stronger teams on that Washington schedule last year? You know, George Karlaftis, probably their best edge rusher, their best pure edge rusher, is also a more of a speed to power guy. He's not really going to overwhelm you with, you know, a bunch of tricks, a bunch of moves and counters. Maybe that also favors Faalele. We know that, you know, this Chiefs run defense can be vulnerable, even though the Ravens didn't do a good job of probing that weakness in the AFC Championship game. Does that maybe favor, you know, Faalele with him having, again, probably better strength, better functional strength than Roger Rosengarten? So, you know, I don't think they're going to be making the decision on who's going to start week one based on what the Chiefs present, because it would be unfair to that player to just throw him out there like, you know, an opener in baseball and just say, this is just a part-time thing. We're going to go with someone else in week two. But I
Right.
do wonder if maybe they kind of split the baby and it's a situational thing, or maybe it's even a rotational thing, like we saw toward the end of last year with those
Right.
left and right tackle spots kind of getting a little bit of a four-man rotation going.
As for quarterback, what is your quandary here, Jonas?
This was something that we've talked about and probably will talk about a lot more, but what are the chances that Devin Leary, a rookie who had more downs than ups, I think can safely be said, in OTAs and in minicamp, is not on the team's initial 53-man roster? I had a breakdown this week, just doing a way too early look
A
ahead.
mental
I
breakdown?
did not have him. Hmm?
A mental breakdown?
No. Not yet. Although
Save that for
with as
training
much
camp.
baseball as I'm being forced to, I did not have him on my initial 53 because I'm just forecasting a kind of downer of a preseason. But it could work to the Ravens' advantage because look, if he looks good, the Ravens are going to keep him. It's as simple as that. You know, preseason is not just a chance to evaluate your guys, but also the dudes on other teams. And the Ravens are going to be kind of hard up for roster spots. You know, there's a lot of young talent on this 91 man roster that they're going to want to keep, but they're also going to look for corners to cut. And if he doesn't look good, then you know you're talking about a guy who was available however many spots in the draft until he was picked. Every team basically said no to him 3 to 6 times essentially, and if they didn't want him then, and if he goes out and struggles in the preseason, throws a bunch of picks, accuracy is all way off, then they're probably not gonna want him then, you know, in the
Yeah.
future. So that would, to me, indicate that the Ravens might feel comfortable saying, "We're gonna take our chances with releasing him, putting him on waivers, tell him that there's a spot for you, excuse me, on the practice squad." And with this new NFL rule, you can, you know, elevate your practice squad quarterback every single week, and you don't have
Right.
to take up a roster spot. It's a really nice thing. That's, you know, kind of a delayed response to the Brock Purdy situation from 2 years ago. So The
Yeah,
Ravens
the
could be
Niners
getting the
rule.
best of both worlds. Yeah, they could be kind of getting the best of both worlds. I think that even though I did include it on that breakdown, I think it's probably more likely than not at this point that Devin Leary does make the team just because, you know, you want to protect your investments, especially in quarterbacks. And it would be pretty surprising unless it is an abjectly terrible preseason from Devin Leary that they do not say we're going to ride with you for sure for at least another year.
Yeah, I give this a 36% chance, which is 4 out of 11 because I last week broke down the last 11 sixth round quarterbacks that were taken, and 4 of those did not make their initial 53-man roster. So it happens fairly often. A sixth round pick is not a huge opportunity cost if you don't end up keeping that guy. The important thing to consider, and we discussed this when he was drafted, is that Devin Leary turns 25 the second week of September. It is not like he is a young Drake May developmental JJ McCarthy Jr. quarterback who just needs a little bit of time to marinate. He has to be close to a finished
He's
product. So
Devin Leary. He's been through some shit.
yes. So keeping him on your 53-man roster and hoping he develops, how much more juice is there to squeeze out of somebody who is going to be 25 at that point and is still kind of having those issues? There hasn't been a sixth round quarterback who was left off the initial 53-man roster since Tanner Lee in 2018. So it's been a little while, but it does happen fairly often. And there's not a whole lot of difference between a sixth round quarterback and an undrafted free agent quarterback. Not saying Emory Jones is going to make this team as an undrafted free agent, but I think that this happens fairly often. A sixth round pick is not a whole lot of investment.
Yeah, and the Ravens have shown they're not afraid to cut their losses in recent
Yep.
years. They've traded guys, they've cut guys, and they've made do. It's as simple as that. Last offensive question for you, Paul. What are the chances that the Ravens tight ends finish with more yards or catches than wide receivers? And this might sound kind of crazy in theory, just because of the prevailing trends and the headwinds in NFL say that wide receivers are always going to be 9 of the top 10 in receiving yards every single season atop that leaderboard. But there is recent precedent for this. In 2019, Lamar's MVP season, his tight ends had more catches and more receiving yards than his wide receivers. Last year, it was not especially close. Wide receivers had 185 catches for 2,216 yards. Tight ends had 82 catches for 1,042 yards. But that was with Mark Andrews basically only playing half the season. That was with Isaiah Likely not really catching steam until the final 6 games or so of the season. And now the Ravens have they don't have Odell. Maybe there's going to be more of an emphasis on 2 tight end looks as we talked about last year. Charlie Kohler's come on strong. Pat Ricard is going into this camp healthy. Maybe just the reliance on the running game more kind of tilts the balance more on play action targets to tight ends than to wide receivers just because of how they're aligning and stuff like that. So probably unlikely, but how would you handicap the chances that we get a redux of 2019 and it's a tight end dominant passing offense?
Who is in that wide receiver room in 2019, Jonas? It was rookie Hollywood Brown. It was Willie Snead. It was Seth Roberts, and it was Miles Boykin. And the tight ends on that roster were first round pick Hayden Hurst and third round breakout Mark Andrews. So I don't think anybody expected to have the kind of season that he had in his rookie year. Look, Zay Flowers had 53 yards a game last year and finished with over 850 yards. If Zay has fewer than 50 yards a game this year, that would be a bad thing. And I think the yards that OBJ picked up will be disseminated between Devontae Walker and maybe a little bit more to Nelson Aguilar and hopefully a lot more to Rashad Bateman. I think if the tight ends finish with more yards and more catches than the wide receivers, I think that's objectively a bad thing. I think that's a sign that the offense is not working as well as it should be. I think it would be great if Mark Andrews has 1,000-yard season. It would be great if Isaiah Likely has a breakout 500, 600-yard season, but the wide receivers need to be doing their part too.
2019 offense ball, if in case you don't remember,
It was
was the
great.
most efficient passing offense and the most efficient rushing offense
And
in
how
the
many
NFL,
playoff games
obviously.
did it win?
Oh my god, you and your rings.
Playoff
uh,
wins. That's all I'm asking.
I know, I know.
I think you need in today's game, you need a high-powered offensive attack led by good
I'm
wide
not
receivers in
I
order to
I'm
win
not
playoff
I'm
games.
not I'm not making that argument. I'm
Okay.
simply asking the questions. I'm a politician. I'm a politician. Just 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 raising certain alarm bells. All right, let's pivot the question slightly in a slight angle twist. What are the chances that the Ravens' top two tight ends have more receiving yards than the Ravens' top two wide receivers?
That is a
Could
good question. Yeah.
Andrews and Zay
You,
have more than Zay and I don't know Bateman or whoever it is?
you mean could Andrews and Isaiah likely have
Well,
more than
they're both named Zay.
Zay? Yeah, I know,
There's
but
Big
Zay
Zay and
Flowers.
there's Little
Yeah.
Zay.
Yeah. I think that is a better question. And I think it's going to come down to how much of a bounce back year we get from Rashad Bateman. Is he going to have 367 yards again, or is he going to have more than 500 yards that he should? And are we going to get thousand yard season from Zay Flowers, which I think if he plays all 17 games or if he plays 16 of those 17 games, we should see. So it's a good question. I think that'll
Yeah.
be a whole lot closer. And I think that's closer to 50-50 than the entire tight ends room outpacing the entire wide receivers room in either catches or yards.
All right, let's move to defense. Somewhat under discussed storyline on the Ravens beat, but could potentially blast into a full on inferno when training camp starts. The Marlon Humphrey situation, missed most of OTAs, missed the last 2 days of minicamp with what John Harbaugh said were nagging issues. So, Paul, my prompt for you: what are the chances that Marlon Humphrey plays all 17 games this season? He has played every game in 3 of his 7 seasons in Baltimore, including all 17 in 2022. But I keep coming back to his remarks on his podcast at the end of last season where, you know, they just lost to the Chiefs. He'd come back, but he'd only played, I think, about like 15 snaps against Kansas City in the first half and then just didn't play again. And he said it was just pain going into every game. And it was like, this was hurt, then you're sick, then this is hurt, then you're sick again. And then this new injury is just like freak, dot, dot, dot. For me, literally, physically, it was just going into every game, like feeling kind of like crap. And here we are 4+ months later, still dealing with nagging issues. I don't know if those issues, last week are what he was dealing with last season, but it's probably fair to assume there's somewhat of a connection there. So, where are you on the Marlon Humphrey durability police?
Not feeling great about it, Jonas. I don't feel great about it. It is not a whole lot of positive vibes coming from that side, and I think he's got to be careful because Nate Wiggins is right behind him. You obviously had a breakout year from Brandon Stevens last year, who could be looking for a contract extension at some point soon. Hopefully, you're going to get a healthy season from like the backups, like Jalen Armour Davis and Pepe Williams. Arthur Mollett is back for another season. I think the Ravens are not going to be too worried about rushing him back if he goes down with anything because of that depth that they have. Look, cornerback depth gets ravaged every year. And we saw last year just how many cornerbacks went down, safeties went down over the course of the season. They were able to weather that storm. They should be in a similar spot this year, but Marlon's got to be careful because he's getting older and he's still very expensive. And if he continues to miss a whole lot of games, you don't feel great about it.
Yeah, this could be, I don't want to say reckoning, but this could be a year of grand re-examinations of the two of the biggest deals pre-Lamar of Eric DeCosta's tenure, where he paid big money to extend Marlon Humphrey for a very long time, and he paid Ronnie Stanley big money for a very long time. And if both those guys' legs give out on them during this year where they are well positioned to finally knock through that Super Bowl door, it's going to be, I don't know, like it was the right decision to extend both those guys. What Eric DeCosta does that's different than other GMs is he makes or he has paid more in guaranteed money so that he can pay less in salary. So he's obviously taking a chance that those guys would be available and high quality toward the end of their career, in the hopes that the lesser, average annual salary maybe gives him a little bit more wiggle room down the road to add some complementary help. And obviously, the Ravens have drafted well, I think, at that cornerback position, where, as you said, Paul, they should be able to withstand, a couple games from Marlon Humphrey. But we're getting to that stage in Marlon Humphrey's contracts, where if you look at on Spot Track, it starts to get a little appetizing as to, can we get out from underneath this deal if we really want to? And if he can't stay healthy this year, and if Nate Wiggins comes on, maybe you start looking at, where are the escape hatches, and can we allocate some of that money to Brandon Stephens, perhaps, if he really comes on strong. So I think you had it as 20%. I'm probably right there with you for Marlon making it through this season unscathed. He's, he plays a balls to the wall style, really physical. And I don't know, just, if he's going to be able to kind of sustain that type of play mentality the way he has, without perhaps adjusting his game.
Yeah,
Moving
not
from
great.
the back end of moving from the back end of the defense to the front. This was probably a little bit more interesting than I thought when I was initially looking into it. What are the chances that Ravens defensive linemen as a group finished with more sacks than Ravens outside linebackers? So last year it was 20 and a half for the interior, with a big tip of the cat to Justin Madubuike, who had 13, and just 25.5 for the edge rushers, with Jadeveon Clowney getting 9.5, Kyle Van Noy getting 9. I was frankly surprised that was only a 5-sack difference between those two groups. Obviously, you got some help from Kyle Hamilton, you got some help from Patrick Queen, Arthur Maulet. Everyone chipped in. That's what made that pass rush so great. But we've seen this interior defensive line, I think, take a step forward in minicamp, at least. Obviously, you don't want to make too much of a big deal about it without the pads coming on, but Broderick Washington looks better. This is, that point in the career of a young defensive lineman, a talented young defensive lineman like Travis Jones, where they really start to figure things out. We know, Mike Pierce, Brent Urban, usually good for a couple sacks a season. We also know that the outside linebacker group is talented, a little bit injury prone, and probably just going to get better opportunities than the interior, because of that's NFL football, baby. So what would you say the chances are that we get an interior led pass rush more so than out there on the edge?
Maybe 35%. It's still an uphill battle that they have to face. I don't think we'll get anybody who has, maybe Odafe Owe is the only one who I think is going to threaten for double-digit sacks this season. It's not going to be anybody else. David Ajabo, breakout 17-game fully healthy season aside. I think it's probably going to be one of those guys, unless, Jonas, they sign my free agent crush, which is Emmanuel Agba. Maybe he comes into camp as a veteran, and boy, he lights a fire under them. He's a late summer signing, just like Jadeveon Clowney last year, and I'm sitting here in January just basking in the glow of my opinions.
Wash King.
5.5 sacks last year for Miami.
I did hit on 105.7 yesterday, and Jason Leconfor brought up Emmanuel Agba as a potential free agent addition. I was like, "Who got to you, Jason?
Oh,
Was
no.
it Paul? You could tell me."
Oh no!
All
This
right.
can't go mainstream. This is my take.
The last hypothetical. What are the chances that? Oh, and by the way, I would say you said 40%. I think I'd probably go like 25. I still think that the Ravens will get enough sacks from the edge rushers, just like a bunch of guys finishing with 6 to 8 sacks, and they're going to have power numbers that way. Last prompt for you, Paul. What are the chances that 2024 Trenton Simpson is better than 2023 Patrick Queen? Rave reviews so far for Trenton Simpson. Obviously a third round pick last year who has first round tools, just not really that well honed mentally coming into the draft. But Harbaugh said that he's looked really good. Roquan said he doesn't understand how explosive he is, but he thinks that he will realize all of his potential, and if so, watch out. But also Patrick Queen was second team All Pro last year, and I think people in their haste to paint Patrick Queen with the brush of a traitor and someone who profited from Roquan Smith are forgetting that he was also a very, very, very good very good linebacker last year. So I'm quite skeptical that Trenton Simpson will come anywhere close to being as good as PQ was last year. But also, this is the second year of Trenton Simpson, and last year was year 4 for Patrick Queen. So I think it would be, unrealistic to expect anywhere close to the form of a guy who is an All-Pro and Pro Bowl linebacker.
Are people really letting the fact that PQ signed with a division rival color their perspective of the kind of season that he had last year?
Yes, they are.
He was phenomenal. He was outstanding last year. We cannot forget how good he was yet next to Roquan Smith. I know Roquan unlocked him in the second half of the 2022 season, but PQ was one of the best linebackers in the NFL last year. That is hard to replace. And Trenton Simpson, as great as he has looked and as rave as the reviews are, he's a third round pick who is entering his first season as a starter. I expect him to step up, and I expect Roquan to be able to help him along, but I really don't think there's a very good chance that he's better than Patrick Queen in his first year as a starter. I mean, maybe 10%.
Yeah, I think the thing that is easy to overlook with PQ is not only was he good in coverage, not only was he, good against the run, but as a pass rusher, I think it's easy to forget just how unselfish he was. Like, obviously this was him functioning well in the scheme, but how many other linebackers around the league did you see throwing themselves full throttle into, guards and centers doing those kind of, those pick stunts that were so effective with Justin Madubuike last year? Like, it's one thing to have the physicality to do that, and another thing to have the coach who's willing to dial up those schemes. But also, you got to be unselfish. You got to say, I'm going to, try to take out two guys like a bowling ball, knowing that I probably won't get to the quarterback, but it's good for the guy who I'm blocking for. It's sometimes you're gonna, be that roller on a pick and roll who does get the alley oop, but a lot of times you're just setting up, LeBron James to get to the rim, and that was PQ a lot of the time last year. And I think Trent Simpson is a really good guy, really great teammate. Teammates love talking about him. I don't have any doubts that he would do that same kind of, he would fulfill the X's and O's as diligently as PQ was, but I don't know if he's going to be as good as doing that kind of stuff. I don't know if he's going to have the kind of timing and angles that PQ did last year. So just remember all the small things that Patrick Queen was so reliable for last year, and just the fact that he was also extremely durable and reliable, and that's half the battle. And Trent Simpson looks like a Greek god, but until he goes out there and plays, 4 seasons, 16 games, 17 games as regularly as PQ did, it's going to be really tough to measure up to him.
Exactly. All right, Jonas, let's talk about Hard Knocks, because the Ravens are going to be featured as part of HBO's Hard Knocks for the second half of the season as part of their AFC North weird divisional introspective that they're going to give this season. First time that they're going to be looking at an entire division. First episode is going to air December 3rd, and it'll cover the final 6 weeks of the regular season and carry over into the playoffs, which, of course, the Ravens hope that they will be a part of. It's funny because John Harbaugh was just on the Adam Jones podcast, which is presented by the Baltimore Banner, talking about Hard Knocks. And here's what he had to say.
What's crazy is I never watched that show. I've never watched it. I mean, I'm not saying I'll see a clip or two here. Someone said, "Did you see Hard Knocks last night?" And they'll show me a clip. And I'm just like, I just think it's just not real. I mean, people think it's real, but it's not real. It's everything's put on. I mean, you got to put a microphone and a camera in your face. People aren't the same. If I don't mind, if they want to bring Hard Knocks in here, it wouldn't bother me one bit, just because I know that I'll tell our guys is, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to just be us. We're going to say what we say. We're going to do what we do. We're going to handle it the way we handle it, because we got nothing to be ashamed of, and we're not trying to put on a show or an act for anybody. And we do have final. We better have final editing power on the whole thing. I think they do, but our guys handle themselves in a professional way. I wouldn't mind the world seeing that at some point, but I also do think it's a distraction, because you got a camera in your face. The Office, right? it wasn't real. They really weren't in the office. That was put on and made up. So there's always going to be some acting that's going to go on in that type of scenario. And, I just want our guys to get the most out of the day and become the best team they can be. That's got to be a little drained, don't you think, Adam?
Oh, big time. Yeah. Big time.
Okay, I love that for so many reasons. Well, the first being that The Office was a scripted TV show on NBC, and I really wonder if anybody watched The Office thinking that this was an actual documentary, not a mockumentary, whereas Hard Knocks is presented in documentary-style format. I also love that John Harbaugh, for the first 30 seconds of that answer, said, it's all fake. You put a camera in front of anybody's face, and they will not be themselves. And then he realized he should probably backpedal and give some kind of validation to the show itself, which is put forth by the league. He should give some kind of credence to its reality. And then he said, well, we're just going to be ourselves. You put it on us. And I'm going to say, we're not going to be fake. We will do what nobody does, and we will show it to be our true self. And then finally, him laughing and saying, well, they better give us final editing power, because we know how careful John Harbaugh is about the dissemination of video, of practices, of workouts, of all kinds of stuff. And wouldn't you know it, a week after that podcast comes out, Jonas, the Roger Goodell watched the Adam Jones podcast and said, you know what? We're putting you on camera, and you're going to have that speech with your team. You're going to tell them to be themselves and their real, authentic selves.
That's 2 disseminations for you in one podcast, Paul. Dissemination Nation, rise up.
Nope. No dissemination, as Darth Vader said.
Yeah, it's all very, very funny. Well, we know that John Harbaugh is a Office fan. I remember him quoting, "I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious." So I think he has an idea of what exactly is going on in the Office. I don't think he's that pop culture blind, but to bring up the Office in the context of a docuseries where I'm sure he knows coaches around the league who have had their locker rooms and their team facilities invaded by these cameras is a little bit confusing. But whatever. I mean, it's good content for us. I can't wait to see all of the kind of behind the scenes stuff that we get. Remember that there was a chance that Lamar was going to be on that QB1 Netflix show, but he ultimately said he didn't want to do it. So this is kind of the next best thing. I imagine that he's going to be front and center, assuming that he's healthy and on camera for all this stuff.
Yeah, but they will have 3 other teams that they will have to cover. So I do wonder how much of that will be broken up in between him and Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson / Justin Fields. That'll be the most fascinating. That could be the thing to watch down the stretch is the Steelers. Although I think you could argue that, this between the Steelers and the Browns and maybe even the Bengals, those 3 teams are in much more dire straits this season and have a lot more pressure on them this season than the Ravens do at this point.
Last prompt for you, Paul. What HBO show will be the best comparison for the 2024 Ravens? I had one that you co-signed on, but I found another one that I can elaborate on.
Yeah, you put True Detective season 1 in there, which is the only season I've seen because I've heard that the rest of the seasons are not very good. But I love that show. The first season of it was outstanding.
You love it so much you never watched another episode.
Well, no, everybody said don't watch it after season 1, so I stopped. I didn't want to ruin. I'm of the opinion I would rather stop watching a show too early. It's like a veteran on your team. You'd rather cut him a year early than cut him a year late. I'd rather stop watching a show a season early than stop watching it too late after it's already been ruined. To make another Office comparison, I wish I had stopped watching right as Michael left, because it went so downhill so quickly, and it kind of ruined my perspective of the show and my opinion of the show a little bit, and it's taken me years to recover from that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you can get that.
Apologies accepted.
Therapy.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a completionist. I also did not watch anywhere close to all of The Office. I think I gave up like late season 2 when Michael drives his car into the lake. That was a thing that happened, right?
You gave up season 2. There's like season 3 and season 4 are excellent.
All right. Well, I'll take your word for it. This is the off season.
Can we do watch parties with John Harbaugh?
My comp. Oh, and by the way, the reasoning for True Detective season 1 was because I just envision Rust and who was what was the name of the other detective, but basically being
Yeah.
Lamar and Roquan, two guys from the South, two very different personalities, but coming together to find Carcosa, which in this case is the Super Bowl in New
I
Orleans.
think it. I think
my-
that's. I think that comparison though will be Russell Wilson and Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin's just going to turn to Russell Wilson and say the Woody Harrelson line of "I just want you to stop saying weird shit," which is one of my favorite movies.
That's a great one. My deep bag pull is season 5 of Veep, which is a great show because that
Great
is
show.
the year. That's the season where Selena Meyer gets her. We get
Spoilers.
resolution on whether she's going to be for a show that last aired in 2016. For a show that's the season where she gets resolution on her bid to become president. And spoiler alert, it does not go well. And just looking at some of the quotes from that, I just think that this is probably going to be perfectly encapsulate how Ravens fans will feel if something bad happens to them in the playoffs. Selena Meyer, can I really blame another country for something they didn't do? Ben Cafferty, it's been the cornerstone of American foreign policy since the Spanish-American War. So it's never the Ravens' fault. It's always the refs' fault. It's always Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce effing with Justin Tucker before the game. Just a great show, just a great line, and then I can't wait till HBO graces us with more Ravens content.
Yeah, if we can get Julia Louis-Dreyfus to pop into the Ravens post-game celebration,
Maryland
locker
native,
room. Yeah,
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Maybe break down some dance moves with John Harbaugh. All right, that just about does it for the Banner Ravens podcast this week. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. And at All Banner Sports, of course, you can read everything that Jonas has to offer, and Gianna Hahn and Kyle Goon and all of our entire great Banner staff on the BaltimoreBanner.com. $1 for 6 months. Please like, rate, review, subscribe to the Banner Ravens podcast. If you write us a good review, I will read it out here on the show. Thanks so much for following along. For Jonas